The dry wind carried the scent of dust and distant mesquite across Elias Thorne's small ranch. The sun, a brutal disk in the cerulean sky, beat down relentlessly on the parched earth. Elias, a man whose hands were as calloused as old leather, squinted at the horizon. He'd lived in this desolate stretch of Arizona territory for 40 years, and he'd seen his share of hardship. But the past few weeks had been different. It started with the cattle. A steer, then a cow, found dead in the western pasture. Not from disease, not from wolves, but drained. Cleanly. Like all the blood had simply vanished. Elias had seen strange things in his time, but this was beyond explanation. The ranch hands, a superstitious lot, muttered about desert spirits and things that walk in the night. Elias dismissed their talk, but a cold knot of dread had begun to tighten in his own gut. He was mending a broken fence post near the Whispering Canyon, a deep, jagged scar that cut across the land like a forgotten wound. The canyon was notorious in these parts, known for its sudden, unpredictable gusts of wind that sounded like voices, and for the occasional disappearance of livestock, and sometimes even men. Most folks gave it a wide berth, but Elias's land stretched right to its very edge. As he hammered a nail, a strange chill swept through the sweltering air, raising goosebumps on his arms. The wind in the canyon intensified, and this time, it wasn't just a howl. It was a distinct whisper, like a chorus of low, breathy voices speaking in a language he couldn't understand. The hairs on the back of his neck bristled. He gripped his hammer tighter. Then, a sound cut through the wind. A faint, mournful moan seemed to rise from the very depths of the canyon, a sound that twisted his insides. It wasn't human, not exactly, but it carried the chilling echo of pain and sorrow. His old dog, Rusty, usually glued to his side, let out a terrified whimper and bolted for the safety of the barn. Elias straightened up, his eyes fixed on the canyon rim. He was a man of logic and practicality, but the unearthly sound shook him to his core. He'd heard tales of the canyon from the old-timers, stories of the land claiming its due, of lost souls unable to find peace. He'd always scoffed at them. Now, standing on the precipice of that whispering abyss, he wasn't so sure. He walked cautiously to the edge, peering into the sun-drenched darkness below. The canyon floor was a jumble of jagged rocks and stunted, wind-battered trees. Nothing seemed out of place. Yet, the air grew colder, heavy with a cloying, earthy scent, like freshly turned grave soil mixed with something sickly sweet. The moaning sound came again, louder this time, closer, and then he saw it. Not in the depths of the canyon, but on a narrow ledge about 20 feet below him. A figure, indistinct in the flickering light and shadows, seemed to be hovering just above the ground. It was tall and gaunt, clad in what looked like tattered old-fashioned clothes. It was swaying gently, back and forth, as if caught in an unseen current. Elias froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. He blinked, rubbing his eyes, convinced the sun and his weary mind were playing tricks on him. But when he opened them again, the figure was still there, its head tilted in an unnatural angle, facing him. No eyes, no face, just a void where features should have been. The moaning intensified, now sounding less like sorrow and more like a chilling wail of pure agony. Elias stumbled back from the edge, his breath catching in his throat. This wasn't some natural phenomenon. This was something else entirely. Something unnatural, something that defied the laws of the living world. He fled back towards the ranch house, the terrifying wail echoing in his ears. He slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling hands. Outside, the whispers in the canyon seemed to grow louder, more insistent, calling to him from the dark. Elias Thorne spent the rest of that day and night in a state of agitated vigilance. He loaded his Winchester rifle, polished his Colt revolver, and placed them both on the kitchen table, within arm's reach. Every creak of the old house, every gust of wind against the windows, made him jump. The memory of the hovering figure in the canyon, its silent, faceless stare, was seared into his mind. Rusty, his dog, remained huddled under the porch, refusing to come out, his whimpers echoing Elias's own unease. The following morning brought no relief, only a relentless, oppressive heat that seemed to bake the very air. But it wasn't just the heat. It was the land itself. The small creek that fed his pastures, usually a dependable trickle even in dry spells, was now bone dry, its bed cracked and brittle. His cattle, already stressed, began to bellow with thirst. "No, no, no," Elias muttered, his voice hoarse. He had wells, of course, but the creek was crucial for the outer pastures. This wasn't just a drought. This was too sudden, too absolute. He remembered the cloying, earthy scent from the canyon. Now he imagined it clinging to the dry air, a chilling reminder of the presence he'd witnessed. He rode out to the western pasture, the sun beating down mercilessly. The landscape was desolate, the sparse grass withered to brown. He found another steer, lying still on the ground, its body strangely shrunken. Just like the others, there was no blood. This confirmed his terrifying suspicion. This wasn't nature's doing. As he knelt beside the carcass, a low, guttural hum seemed to vibrate through the earth beneath him. It wasn't loud, but it was deep, resonant, and felt like it was coming from everywhere at once, chilling him to the bone. It was the same awful sound he'd heard before, only stronger now, closer. He scanned the horizon, his hand instinctively going to his revolver. He saw nothing. The shimmering heat haze danced above the dusty plains. But the humming intensified, joined by that faint, mournful wail that had driven Rusty into hiding. Then, from the very edge of the Whispering Canyon, a group of his cattle, driven mad by thirst and fear, began to run. Not towards the ranch house, but into the canyon itself. They plunged heedlessly into the jagged descent, their desperate lowing echoing as they disappeared into the shadows. Elias knew it was a death trap. No animal that stumbled into the canyon's depths ever returned. But something compelled him to follow. Not to save them, he knew that was futile, but to understand. To see what was driving them to their doom, what was causing this unholy affliction upon his land. He dismounted, leaving his horse tied to a gnarled mesquite tree, and approached the canyon rim again. The humming was now a deafening roar in his ears, and the wailing was a chorus of tormented souls. He peered into the abyss, and there, deep within the shadows of the canyon floor, he saw them. Not the figure from yesterday, but a scattered collection of objects. They were dark, irregular shapes, lying amidst the rocks and dust. As his eyes adjusted, he recognized them. They were the bones of his cattle, picked clean, bleached white under the perpetual gloom of the canyon. And amidst them, a faint, sickly red glow pulsed from something unseen, something hidden deeper in the shadows. It was then that he heard the unmistakable sound of footfalls, heavy and deliberate, echoing from the very bottom of the canyon. Thump, thump, thump. They weren't the erratic steps of an animal, but the rhythmic stride of something with purpose. And they were heading his way. Elias Thorne didn't hesitate. The sight of his cattle's bones, and that pulsing red glow, was a chilling confirmation of his worst fears. This wasn't merely a drought, it was a deliberate, malevolent act. The rhythmic thump, 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 growing louder with each passing second, pulled him like a grim current. He knew going into the canyon was madness, but to stay above, knowing what lay below, was unthinkable. He began his descent, scrambling down the treacherous, loose rock face. His boots slipped on the crumbling shale, sending small avalanches cascading into the depths. The chilling wail intensified, a symphony of torment that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. The air grew thick with that sickening, sweetly metallic stench, and the heat from the sun above was replaced by a strange, clammy cold that seeped into his clothes. As he got lower, the canyon floor began to reveal its terrible secrets. The scattered bones were not just those of his cattle. He saw the cracked skulls of deer, the brittle femurs of mountain lions, and even horrifyingly, the splintered remains of what looked like human femurs. This pit was a graveyard, not of natural death, but of something far more sinister. The red glow pulsed stronger now, illuminating a dark, gaping maw at the very bottom of the canyon. It was a cave entrance, shrouded in perpetual darkness, and from it emanated the deafening humming and the chilling wails. The footfalls grew louder, more distinct, like heavy, dragging steps approaching the mouth of the cave. Elias crouched behind a large boulder, his Winchester raised, heart pounding like a drum against his ribs. He peered out, trying to make sense of the monstrosity before him. Then, from the cave's black depths, it emerged. It wasn't the ethereal, hovering figure he'd seen before. This was a physical horror. It was massive, easily twice the height of a man, its form distorted and grotesque. Its skin, where visible through tattered, ancient-looking robes, was a mottled gray, cracked and dry like baked clay. Its limbs were unnaturally long and spindly, ending in clawed hands that dragged along the ground with each thump of its foot. But it was its face that truly froze Elias's blood. It was a parched, stretched canvas of despair. Its eyes, deep-set and hollow, glowed with that same sickly red light he'd seen pulsing from the cave. Its mouth was a gaping, perpetual scream, stretched wide in a silent, agonized wail. It was a creature of thirst, a being consumed by an eternal, unquenchable craving. The monster moved slowly, deliberately, towards the pile of bones. It picked up a cattle rib, examining it with those glowing red eyes. Then, with a sickening crack, it snapped the bone in half, bringing it to its maw. Elias watched in horror as the creature seemed to absorb something from the bone, a faint, almost invisible vapor rising from the fractured marrow and disappearing into its gaping mouth. As it did, the red glow in its eyes intensified for a moment, and the wailing softened, a momentary cessation of torment. It wasn't consuming flesh, it was consuming life itself, drawing out the very essence from the desiccated remains. This was why his cattle were drained, why the creek was dry. This creature was a drain on the land, on everything. Elias knew then that he wasn't just fighting a monster. He was fighting a living, breathing blight on the land, one that fed on the very vitality of life around it. He took a deep, shaky breath, leveled his rifle, and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the canyon, echoing like thunder. The rifle shot reverberated through the canyon, a violent rupture in the oppressive silence. The creature, caught in the act of consuming, shrieked. It wasn't a sound of pain, but of pure, inhuman fury, a dry, rasping noise that tore at Elias's ears. The red glow in its hollow eyes intensified, pulsing with a furious rhythm. The bullet, a .44 caliber slug, struck its chest with a sickening thud, but there was no splatter, no gush of blood. Instead, it seemed to simply embed itself, leaving a dry, dark mark on the creature's desiccated skin. The beast didn't fall. It didn't even stumble. Instead, it turned its head slowly towards Elias, its gaping, wailing mouth seeming to stretch even wider in silent, monstrous rage. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump of its footfalls quickened, and it began to move towards him, its long, spindly limbs unfolding with unnatural speed. Elias reloaded frantically, his hands shaking but his resolve hardened. This thing wasn't just a monster, it was a plague, and it had to be stopped. He fired again, aiming for its head. The second shot struck just above its eye. This time, a fine dust, like pulverized clay, erupted from the impact point, and the creature let out another dry shriek. Still, it kept coming. He emptied his rifle, each shot finding its mark, each impact sending a puff of dust into the stale canyon air. But the creature absorbed them all, its relentless advance unbroken. Its movements, though still somewhat awkward, gained a terrifying momentum. The ground beneath Elias's feet began to vibrate with each heavy step. The sickly sweet odor intensified, now so strong it made him gag. He realized it was coming from the creature itself, a smell of decay and something else. Something that hinted at centuries of unholy thirst. The wailing chorus in the canyon grew deafening, no longer mournful but triumphant, as if the very air celebrated the monster's approach. Elias dropped the empty rifle, drawing his Colt revolver. He had 6 shots left. He backed away, scrambling over the loose rocks, trying to gain some distance. But the creature was faster than its appearance suggested. Its unnaturally long arm shot out, its clawed hand snatching a jagged rock from the canyon floor. With surprising force, it hurled the rock at him. Elias ducked, the rock whistling past his ear, narrowly missing his head before shattering against the canyon wall behind him. The force of the impact sent shards of stone flying. He knew he couldn't outrun it in this treacherous terrain. He had to face it head-on. He fired the revolver, aiming for the creature's glowing red eyes. The first shot struck, and for a fleeting moment, the red light in one eye flickered, dimming slightly. A low, grinding sound, like stone scraping against stone, emanated from the creature as its head twitched. This was it. This was its weakness. He fired again, and again, aiming for the eyes. Each shot caused a faint flicker, a brief pause in the creature's relentless advance. But it was still moving, its gaping maw now just feet away, the silent wail of physical force pressing down on him. The air around it felt strangely dry, as if it was sucking the very moisture from his skin. He had 1 shot left. His hand was steady, despite the terror gripping him. He aimed, took a breath, and squeezed the trigger. Elias's final shot cracked, echoing the first, more powerful rifle blast. The bullet found its mark, striking the creature's remaining glowing red eye with pinpoint accuracy. This time, the effect was immediate and profound. The sickly red light in the creature's eye vanished entirely, extinguished as if a lamp had been snuffed out. The immense creature recoiled, not with a shriek of rage, but with a guttural, rattling sound that was pure agony. Its massive body shuddered, then began to crumble. It wasn't falling or melting. It was simply disintegrating into dry, fine dust. The ancient, tattered robes dissolved first, swirling into the air like wisps of smoke. Then its gaunt, cracked skin flaked away, followed by the sinewy, brittle limbs. The process was disturbingly fast. In mere seconds, the towering monstrosity that had terrorized Elias and plagued his land was reduced to nothing more than a shifting pile of fine, grayish-red dust on the canyon floor. The deafening humming ceased, replaced by a profound, almost reverent silence. The chilling wails that had echoed from the depths of the canyon faded into nothingness. Elias stood there, Colt still raised, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The air, which had been thick with a cloying stench, now felt lighter, cleaner, though still tinged with the scent of dry earth. He watched the last vestiges of the dust settle, a faint breeze stirring it further into the crevices of the rocks. Slowly, cautiously, he lowered his revolver. His legs felt like lead, and his entire body ached from the adrenaline and exertion. He walked forward, stepping carefully towards the spot where the creature had stood. All that remained was the pile of dust, indistinguishable from the canyon's own parched soil. He nudged it with his boot, and it dispersed even further. The eerie chill that had permeated the canyon began to dissipate, replaced by the natural heat of the sun. He looked up at the sky, visible now without the crushing presence of the creature. The sky was still a brilliant, cloudless blue. He turned his attention back to the surrounding canyon floor. The scattered bones of cattle and other animals were still there, stark white against the dark rock. But the unsettling red glow that had pulsed from the cave entrance was gone. The cave itself seemed to revert to being just a dark, ordinary opening in the rock face. As Elias began his slow, weary climb out of the canyon, he noticed something else. A faint, almost imperceptible trickle of water began to appear in the cracked bed of the small creek that snaked through the canyon floor. It was barely a whisper, but it was there, glistening under the sunlight. And higher up, where the creek flowed into his pastures, he saw a patch of grass, no longer brittle and brown, but showing a hint of green. The land was beginning to heal. The unholy drought, the malevolent thirst, had been lifted. Elias didn't know what the creature was, or where it had come from, but he knew it was gone. He had faced it alone, and he had won. When he finally emerged from the canyon, his body bruised and exhausted, Rusty was waiting for him at the rim, whimpering softly. This time, however, the whimper was one of relief, not fear. Elias knelt and stroked the dog's head. The ranch hands, seeing him return, rushed over, their faces a mixture of fear and relief. They looked towards the canyon, as if expecting something to emerge. "It's gone," Elias said, his voice raspy. "It's gone." He looked back at the canyon, now silent and seemingly ordinary under the setting sun. He knew the terror he had faced was real, and it would forever be etched into his memory. But for now, the land could finally breathe again. The weeks that followed Elias Thorne's ordeal in Whispering Canyon were a strange mix of profound relief and lingering unease. The immediate change was undeniable. The small creek that had been bone dry for weeks now flowed with a steady, clear current, not a raging torrent, but a healthy, life-giving stream. The parched earth around its banks slowly began to drink, and within days, the first stubborn blades of green grass reappeared, a vibrant contrast to the surrounding brown. His cattle, though still skittish near the canyon rim, drank deeply and seemed to regain their vitality. The ranch hands, who had witnessed the mysterious deaths of the cattle and the sudden revival of the creek, no longer spoke of desert spirits in hushed tones. They spoke of Elias, of his grim determination, and of the unholy force he had faced alone. A new respect, tinged with a quiet awe, settled over them. They helped him mend the remaining fences, their work faster and more focused than before. But for Elias, the peace was not absolute. The creature was gone, reduced to dust, but the memory of its silent, wailing face and its unholy thirst was etched into his very being. He still woke in the dead of night, the phantom humming vibrating in his ears. He still felt the phantom chill of its presence, even under the blazing sun. The canyon, once just a dangerous natural feature, was now a place of profound dread and a testament to the horror he had witnessed. He found himself avoiding that side of his property, instinctively veering away from the western pasture, even when work called him there. Rusty, too, remained changed. While the dog no longer whimpered in terror, he never ventured near the canyon again. If Elias walked too close to the rim, Rusty would whine and tug at his pants leg, his eyes pleading. It was a silent understanding between them, a shared trauma that bonded them more deeply than ever before. One afternoon, Elias found himself standing by the newly flowing creek, watching the clear water run over smooth stones. He reached down, letting the cool liquid wash over his hand. It felt pure, clean, a stark contrast to the cloying metallic stench that had hung in the canyon. He looked at the burgeoning green life around him, a silent promise of renewal. He had won. He had driven the ancient blight from his land. But the victory came at a cost. The land bore a scar, the silent, terrible memory of the thirst. And Elias, too, bore a scar. Not a physical wound, but a deeper one, a permanent imprint of the supernatural horror he had faced. He was no longer just a rancher. He was a man who had stared into an abyss of unholy hunger and emerged, forever changed. The West was a land of harsh beauty, of endless horizons and unforgiving challenges. Elias had always known that. But now, he also knew that beneath the dusty surface, in the forgotten corners of the wilderness, there were things that defied understanding, things that fed on life itself, and that sometimes, a man had to be willing to face the darkest nightmares to protect what little he had. He turned, looking back towards his thriving ranch, a testament to his resilience. The fight was over, but the watch had just begun.